So Ashton, tell us about you and your three kids and three, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And your youngest is two, oldest
Yep.
is seven. Do I have that right?
8.
Eight. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I am 28 with 3 boys. My oldest is 8, then 4, and then 2. I had my oldest 4 days before my 20th birthday. So that was a adjustment in its own. But he has been the biggest blessing to me and my whole family. He was born 6 weeks early just from preterm labor. So that was scary being 19 and having no idea what was going on. And I had to have him at UW because the hospital near us can't take care of babies that small. I think they can now, but not 8 years ago. So I was 2 hours away from home, pretty much by myself. My sister stayed with me the whole time, but it was just terrifying at 19.
I bet.
Yeah. Um, and he was only in there about 3 weeks, I think. And it was just working on his feeding stuff. Everything else was great. He was 6 pounds, 2 ounces. So he was a big boy for being that early.
My first was he was 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and
Oh,
I was 21. I was a little.
uh-huh. I love that. But he was great, super healthy for being early. Came home after 3 weeks, and he's literally the smartest kid I've ever met in my entire life.
Oh,
Like,
those are the tricky ones. Be careful with those guys.
right?
Our ones are tricky.
Yes. Uh, and then I met my husband probably about a year or two after he was born, and he's just been a great dad figure to him. And we got married and had our own son together, who um, he was born at 37 weeks, so term, but I got to the hospital super late because my first pregnancy was so confusing. Like they always say, when you're in labor, but I had nothing to base it off of. And so I waited really, really long and I got to the hospital and I was 10 centimeters dilated.
Wow.
Yeah, we were there for less than 20 minutes and he was out.
Oh my
It
God.
was terrifying and not part of my birthing plan whatsoever.
Sure.
Yeah, I've always wanted the epidural and all the things, but because he came out so fast, he had a lot of fluid in his lungs. And so he stayed at their like special care nursery, not a NICU, but just a little extra help to get that all cleared up, only for a few days. And so that was the most normal experience for me. And he's also brilliant, 4 years old now, crazy. And then my youngest, he just turned 2 last month, and he was born at 27 weeks because I got severe preeclampsia. And that was such a strange experience because I would have had absolutely no idea if my friend hadn't gone through it. Because
Yeah. So, a lot of the women in here have had preeclampsia, and I never dealt with that. I had lots of pregnancy issues with all of my
yeah.
kids, but I never dealt with preeclampsia. So, what were like, tell us a little bit about it. How did you, like you said, your friend? So,
Yeah. When it was like 3 weeks before he was born, I had some really bad headaches, but I was also working nights. So I would go to work at like 6 p.m. and get home at like 3 a.m. I was
and
like,
what,
oh, I was bartending at the time.
okay, okay.
Yeah. So I would get these major like migraines, like knock me out. I don't want to be awake right now kind of headaches. But I just kind of dismissed it as I'm exhausted, I have kids, I'm pregnant, whatever. And they would just come and go. It wasn't all the time. So I wasn't too worried about it. And then I noticed that I was super swollen and I gained more weight than I did with my other pregnancies. Like my other ones, I'd gained like 15 to 25 pounds because they were small babies. But this one I had already gained like 40 pounds and I was only 27 weeks. And I was just like, well, it's my third pregnancy. It's another boy,
A
that
lot of,
happened. But I was telling my friend about how swollen I was and how these headaches were driving me insane. And she's like, you need to check your blood pressure because she had preeclampsia with her first baby, and those were all signs for her. It's like, oh, good idea. So I went over to my mom's house and she came out with an actual like cuff and a stethoscope. And I was like, Mom, what are you doing?
You're so awesome.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, I used to do this for a living. I know what I'm doing. I'm like, okay. And so she starts doing her thing and she's like, oh, you need to go to the hospital right now. I was like, Mom, you didn't even finish. And she's like, no, I know. You need to go. And I was like, I just want to double check. So I went over to that friend's house and she had one of the electric cuffs. And I checked it there and it was, I can't even remember what it was, but it was super high. And she's like, how are you okay right now? Like, you need to go to the hospital now. So I dropped my kids off and then drove myself to the hospital. I walked in there and I was like, my friend and my mom are telling me that I should be here because my blood pressure's high and whatever. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll just get you checked out. I'm sure you're okay. Because I was acting completely fine. And then they took me back there, hooked me up to the cuff and whatever. And they were all like, what? And then another thing that comes with preeclampsia is protein in your urine.
Yeah.
And so they did like the urine test, and that really blew them away. They were like, this is going to start affecting your, whatever, your insides. Like, you need to get taken care of. This is insane. So they hooked me up to all the monitors, and they were having a hard time finding the baby's heartbeat. And so they're like, you know what, we're just going to send you down south to UW. You need to call your husband. And I was like, seriously? And they're like, yeah, if you have him here, you're going to get separated. And we don't want that for you. I was like, I don't want that either. So called my husband. He came in. We went down south and, started the long journey. They put me on all sorts of meds to try and calm it down. It worked for probably about 5 days, I think I was in there. And then it just kept going up every time. And there's certain medications for blood pressure that it can help lower your blood pressure, but it's also lowering your heart rate. And so they pretty much maxed out on everything that they could give me without screwing up my heart. So they're like, sorry, like, we're going to have to deliver this baby. It's like, oh gosh. And the original plan was to do a C-section. But they said you've had, 2 other vaginal births. I think that since he's so small, we should at least try to just induce you and, do that. And I was like, I would love that.
Yeah.
So we started that process, and, the Pitocin and the balloon and all those things. But they put the balloon in, and as you may know, with the Foley balloon, it's supposed to fall out on its own after you dilate to 3 centimeters. And hours had passed. My contractions were so strong that I finally was like, okay, I need an epidural. Like, I can't believe I haven't hit 3 centimeters. I had my last baby natural, and this is horrible.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we'll give you the epidural and then we'll check your cervix and see what's going on. And they did all that. And when they went to check my cervix, they realized that the balloon was pushed next to my baby's head. So I was fully dilated, well, enough dilated that, yeah. So,
Goodness.
yeah. So they're like, okay, we're going to take the Foley balloon out and just, break your water and hope baby comes out and whatever. So that was the plan. They took the balloon out and then broke my water, but my baby's cord came out first. So it was prolapsed, and the doctor had to stabilize it by, putting her hand up there and pushing all the pressure back in. And they just wheeled me into the operating room, and I had an emergency C-section.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was a crazy, crazy, like, it's so surreal saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Like, about it. It just doesn't seem real.
Like it happened to somebody else, but you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So your husband, how did he do with all of that?
He handled it well, considering, but it was definitely really scary. I remember when they said we need to take you to the operating room. I was laying down. I looked up at him, and he was looking down at me, and he, teary-eyed and just like, what is happening? And he had to stay back when they took me to the OR, and he said it was like a movie. Like there's just papers flying everywhere, cords going everywhere, and he was just like sitting there like, is everybody like, are they gonna survive? Like what's happening? But the procedure was so quick that he was able to come in there and he got to cut the baby's cord. And so he handled it well. I think the 10 minutes that he couldn't be in there, he had a million thoughts going, but yeah, he handled it all really well.
You mentioned that you had your mom and a friend, so the other kids were taken care of by your mom, and you don't
Yeah.
have to stress about that. But
Yeah.
you're going to a hospital kind of far away from your house, right? Is it 2 hours? Oh,
Yeah. Yep.
do the math and you're saying because you're an hour north of Snohomish. Um,
Yeah.
that's a long ways away from your kids and your house and all of your things.
Yeah.
Um, and you weren't prepared for this, right? So you didn't
Not
go,
at all.
yeah, right. Okay, so he's born. What happens right after he's born? It was emergency C-section. So did you have to be put out?
Yeah. So this part can be a little gruesome, I guess.
A warning.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, that bad. But when they took me in there, they had what felt like to me kind of like a tack, like maybe a dull tack. And they were kind of just tapping my lower half. And they're like, can you feel this? Can you feel this? Can you feel
Because you
this?
had an epidural.
Right.
Okay.
And so they're like, can you feel this? And I was like, I can feel you touch me. Like, I don't know what I can feel. Like, I was having a panic attack. I was like, I don't know. And so they did the cut and I felt it. And I just yelled, like, I can feel that. And then they put a mask on me and I was out. But
Uh, that's
yeah,
like my worst night. That's so awful.
yeah, it was terrifying. But it was so quick. And then I was out. And then I woke up and I had a baby.
So
Yeah.
you weren't awake when he was born.
No.
And so, but from what you know, like they took him straight out to the NICU because he was so little.
Yeah. So
How
my
big did he end up being?
he was 2 pounds 1 ounce and 14 inches, I want to say. Yeah. So just a teeny little guy. Yeah. But my husband, he was by my head when I woke up and they were like, look to your left. And I was like out of it. And I just heard him say, he's 2 pounds 1 ounce. And I was like, wait, he's out already? Because like to me, I just closed my eyes and opened them. Like it was that quick. And he's like, yeah. And he showed me pictures as I'm, waking up and he had black hair and just a teeny little peanut.
Yeah, little tiny guy. Okay, so what does it look like from there on as far as like your recovery? Did you recover pretty well from everything?
The preeclampsia lasted maybe about a week
Okay.
after, which was pretty quick to me considering
No,
how.
I just learned that. I just learned that from somebody the other day. I can't remember who was telling me, but I thought that like they delivered the baby and it was over.
Right? That's what I thought too until they told me
And
about
so she
it.
was telling me like it kept going. What do you mean? That's
Yeah.
miserable. That means you've just had, so you had a C-section and they still have like, so you're still having headaches, you're still like retaining
Yeah.
water and you're,
The water retention went away pretty quickly because they had me on like Lasix or whatever it's called, where it water pills. Um, but the headaches weren't as severe because the blood pressure is managed by medicine. But yeah, still had to take medicine every day when I've never really taken medicine. But
and C-sections are rough anyway. I had a C-section with my twins and I was like, man, I wish I would have been able to do anything but this.
yeah, I've heard some moms say that it like they would have a C-section over and over again, like it's just the best experience. And I was like, well, mine's a little different. I can't
Yeah, I
agree.
don't know. I had like mine wasn't emergency, but it was planned for a different day.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But
So you didn't have time to like mentally prepare and
yeah, but I mean, I had my twins at 39 and a half weeks. So like,
oh, holy cow.
yeah,
That's
I don't
amazing.
know what happened. I had problems with every other pregnancy and then I got pregnant with twins and I had nothing, no bed rest, no, I mean like nothing. So it's wild,
That's
but
crazy.
yeah, my body was only meant to have twins.
Apparently.
Bar. But yeah, it's anyway, so enough about that me. But what it was, so you've had a C-section and it takes a week to kind of get through your high blood pressure
Yeah.
stuff. And that's hard.
Yeah.
And
It
then
was, but most of it I spent in the hospital. Like I was still a patient for I think like 4 or 5 days because of my blood pressure. And sorry, one sec. I'm on the phone. Might have to cut this part out. Go, go play.
No, that's the best part. We like the kids.
What? No, thank you.
I'm lucky because my teenagers don't have school on Fridays.
Ah,
They're all playing with Millie upstairs because
that's
she's
nice.
yeah.
My 8-year-old stayed home today from because he had a fever. And so I was like, oh, perfect. He'll distract the 4-year-old.
Yeah,
Here we
yeah.
are.
Keep them busy.
Go play. Okay, just be quiet. No talking.
But it won't all the way turn down when I turn it off. So I'll
Okay.
turn it all the way down.
Okay. Can you just be quick with it?
So cute.
It has to be next to mom.
Yes.
Uh, but anyways, so I was in the hospital for I want to say 4 or 5 days where they were just monitoring my blood pressure, making sure that the medication was helping before they sent me home. That was kind of hard because I had 2 other kids at home that couldn't come with me because they were really strict on like the COVID guidelines even then in 2022.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I just need to get home. I need to take a shower in my own shower. I need to get clean clothes. I need, all the things. And I miss my boys. And I didn't get to go down to the NICU, I want to say for like a full 24 hours because I couldn't even like make it 10 feet without feeling faint. So
That adds like a whole other wrinkle to the NICU because you do have to be able to stand up and walk
yeah,
like a certain distance.
yeah,
No, I hate the stories where they tell me that they didn't get to see their kid. Like
yeah,
that's the worst.
it was. And then when I did finally get to go down there and see him, he's in an incubator. I can't do anything. They're so sensitive to light and everything. So it was just, I was just in the room with him, but I couldn't interact with him yet. So that was hard also. But
Yeah. And it's hard to see them in that way, right?
yeah, definitely. And he just looked like a little alien. Like his skin wasn't skin. You see everything. Just
They're like, yeah, it's a definitely quite the experience. Okay, so how did you do? You stayed in for 5 days and were you able, then you went back and forth to the NICU, right? The
yeah,
next.
yeah, yep.
And what were his things? Did they think there was something more than just being premature, or were they worried about other stuff, or it was just prematurity?
It was just the prematurity. He um did contact like never fully diagnosed it, but they said that his lungs were hazy, which is pneumonia. And so he had to be intubated for a period of time and just lots of breathing support. And all the other things that come with premature babies, but there was no like specifics to anything else until later on when he couldn't eat and they didn't know why.
So did they give you steroids when you were in the hospital?
Yeah, he got the 2 doses.
Okay.
But yeah.
That probably, they think that helps probably a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. But he still has pulmonary, what's it called? Bronchopulmonary dysplasia. And so colds are a little harder on him and stuff like that. He came home. He was in the NICU at UW for 114 days. And then he came home for about a week, and his oldest brother is in school and his other brother is in preschool. So all the germs it was at that time February. So he got sick, and it was the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced in my life. And so he's home about a week and had to go to Children's for a couple weeks because his lungs had collapsed from rhinovirus.
Well, put us back we were in the PICU for 3 months with rhinovirus.
Isn't that crazy? Like now that I have a baby that has more needs, I get it. But as a mom that had 2 completely normal babies before, I was like, rhinovirus?
Yeah, like a cold.
Yeah, you're telling me a cold is going to hospitalize my baby?
That was the scariest. In fact, that's the scariest thing we ever had was rhino.
Yeah, same.
Like when you were saying that, I'm like, I remember that. I remember that emergency. Like I remember the
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, it happened. I think it's happened 3 or 4 times since he's been home. That he's had to go, I want to say 3 times to the children's PICU.
Is it getting better as he's getting older? Do you feel like it's getting better?
Yeah, he hasn't been there for almost a year now, probably. No, he went there in February. He had a procedure done and they didn't catch that he was sick because he was showing no symptoms. Um, and then I think the procedure just added to it and he had to be hospitalized. But yeah, he's been good ever since. He had COVID since then and he handled it great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, COVID. She was fine with COVID, but a cold is a no-go. I don't know. It's weird. Okay, so you said that you were, how did you go back and forth between where you live in the hospital to see him in the NICU? And
yeah,
then yeah, no,
yeah, that was definitely one of the hardest parts about it because like with my first, I had no one else who needed me. It was just me and him, so I stayed at the NICU pretty much the whole time. Um, but this time um, um, so with this one, we kind of just took it day by day. The first, it was almost a month of him being born. I hadn't held him yet because he was intubated and everything got worse. So I would spend a little bit of time there. And then I would come home and see my other boys, my husband, and then it was just a day by day thing. Like when I had time, I would go down there, um, but I didn't have a set schedule really. Just kind of went as much as I could. It was really hard.
for the whole, so that for the whole thing, or did you get on a schedule as because you said 100, he was on 100 days?
114. Yeah, we didn't really have a schedule. I know towards the end, I wanted to be there more, just because I, wanted to keep a closer eye on him and, kind of get a feel for when he's going to be able to come home and everything like that. And I was still there quite a bit. But
And you could hold him then, right? When he
yeah, exactly. And sometimes I would just do day trips, drive down 2 hours, spend the day with him, and then drive home. Yeah, it was a lot of driving, put a lot of miles on my car.
And you did. And those roads aren't the best. I mean, that's not the best way to go. If you get the wrong time, you can sit there for 2 hours just waiting to get
Yes.
right?
There was multiple procedures that they had at like 8 a.m. And I was like, how am I going to do this?
You're like, okay, I guess I'll leave at 1 in the morning.
Exactly. Yep.
That's wild. Okay, so with you mentioned that his feeding, they started to notice there was something going on with feeding.
Yeah.
So how did they notice that and what were the differences like between that and your other son who was in the NICU?
Yeah. So my oldest, he had what they called a stridor. So he just kind of squeaked when he was eating. It was just going all over the place. I don't really understand it, but it was easy. He learned how to get over it, and that was that. But with Kai, my youngest, he couldn't finish his feeds, which is really normal. But he would just get tired, really worn out, and they would have to finish his tube feeding. And then he did really good for about a week where he was finishing his feeds, meeting his goals, and they're like, he might get to come home soon. And I got so excited. And then he just kind of plummeted. Like he couldn't hardly stand any of it. He was just not doing great. And I was like, there's got to be something wrong. Like something's happening. So eventually they did a swallow study and they found out that he has severe dysphagia, where it would just go in the wrong place every single time.
So, with that, was he then put on NPO? Like you couldn't do anything orally?
Yep.
And then how long did that? Is that still going on or is that?
No, we've worked with his feeding team really closely over the last year and a half. So he can take pretty much any solid food in moderation. Like he can't eat too much of it because they don't do swallow studies often. So he can do, like a banana, a half a banana for breakfast, or, like little pieces of pancake or whatever. But he can have no thin liquids at all. And he can't eat enough to,
Sure, it's like recreational eating, like not.
Exactly. That's what they call it.
Okay.
You know.
So what do your feeds look like? How do you guys have it set up now? And how was the like process for you start the feeding?
So he gets, are you asking like how, like bolus feed kind of thing?
Yeah, how do you do it? Like, how did you do it at the beginning? Have you changed? What have you learned? Like, just any of that stuff. Just like, yeah, what are you doing now versus then? Or
Yeah. So, and it's all been kind of the same. When he came home, he had a NG tube, um, but it was still a pump feed, smaller volume, obviously. Um, but bolus feeds, five times a day over 30 minutes. And then eventually around his first birthday, he got the G tube. So he was home with us for 8, 9 months with an NG tube, which was horrendous. I did not enjoy the NG tube.
yeah, that's what I hear. So Millie had a G tube from pretty early on, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Those NG tubes, like, did he pull it out all the time?
All the time because he's a thumb sucker. So he would suck his thumb and like hook his finger in and just pull it out, but never wanted it back in.
And
So,
they're really uncomfortable. This is something I haven't ever shared, but I actually got really sick when I was in my mid 30s, and I had an NG tube for
oh,
a while, and they had talked about giving me a G tube. So it's kind of a funny thing. I have a picture of it. I'll
oh
maybe,
my goodness.
but they're so awful and so uncomfortable.
I could only imagine.
It is one of the most painful things. Mine pulled, it didn't get pulled out. What was something happened to it? Anyway, so I feel like now I can look at these little kids and I'm like, I know it's the worst.
Yeah, and they can't even tell you. They can't
No,
even say anything.
they can't even say this is like the worst. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So from personal experience, it's very, very, very
Oh,
uncomfortable.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So I can see why they all are trying to get him out. Now, my baby pulls her G tube out and I have zero idea. It's not uncomfortable. I don't know why she pulls it out. She does it all
Oh,
the time. Like sometimes 3 times a day. I mean, yeah, and she put it in her mouth and tried to swallow it, but she doesn't have a swallow and she doesn't have a gag. So
yeah.
yeah, no, it's a whole mess. So
I think I saw your post about that.
yeah, it's a mess, but she's like super. And I keep telling her, like, maybe we should give her an NG tube so she can be like, which one do you want?
Right. Honestly. I
So
can imagine pulling out a G tube.
she pulls it out fully inflated. Just, I know the doctor is like, they usually don't do this because it's uncomfortable. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. She's just, anyway. So sorry. Anyway, yeah, that's our thing. I've got her like I'm making a onesie that's got some padding so she can't get a hold of it. So anyway.
Crafty.
Well, you got to do something. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I couldn't imagine my son pulling out his YouTube, but he also like hates when I change it deflated. So I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. She doesn't care at all. She's like, but it's because it's probably like got a callus on it now.
Right. Honestly, probably.
She's done it so often. Okay, so how is your life? Like how do you do the feeds and the all the kids and all of the things and how are your other boys with it? How do you feel like you're coping?
I feel like I've gotten used to it now. And kind of just, our own little schedule that we all get along. My kids love to help turn off the pump, but I don't let them disconnect him or anything like that. But yeah, we're all used to it by now. It's kind of just, the norm, everyday life. Yeah.
And what therapies are you just on feeding therapy or what other kind of therapies do you guys do?
He was doing feeding therapy and physical therapy. but our local physical therapist had to take like a medical break, and now it's like more long term. So we haven't seen a physical therapist in a while. And that was just for, like gross motor stuff. Yeah, he just started taking unassisted steps like 2 days ago. He's 25 months old.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
I'm not there yet. So.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like I mean, he showed that he could do it. He was just kind of scared too. But yeah, it's great.
So he has some delays, but he's doing pretty good. Like, is he talking? Is he
Yeah,
saying?
he says lots of words, still some baby babble mostly, but yeah, says lots of words and knows how to tell me what he wants or what he doesn't want.
Therapies, do the other kids come, or are they in school, or what are you usually doing with, like, how do you deal with the family, with the kids?
Yeah, my oldest is in second grade, so he goes to school Monday through Friday. Um, and I take him to and from school because we don't live in the district that he goes to. And then my 4-year-old goes to preschool Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 12. So I'm home alone with just my youngest for those couple hours, but most of the time I'm just sitting at home hanging out with my kids.
So do you still get nervous to take them out and do things?
uh yes, I think so, because I hardly leave the house and I always just like put it up like, there's no reason to, but I think deep down it's more like I'm terrified of germs. And um even though he's been so great over the last few months, I'm still terrified that he's gonna get sick and have to go to the hospital again. We still leave the house, it's just like not often.
Yeah, I think I found that kind of a connecting thing, which is why I wanted to do stuff online.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, I really feel like it's hard for me to leave as soon as this, like, you can feel it in the air. And then
Mhm.
there's like a trigger in my mind that's like, okay, now stay in the house.
Yes.
Like, do
That's
not let her out, you know? And
fall, spring.
yeah. And I think you've got little kids, other little kids, which I think that's got to be another thing. I haven't had to deal with that. Um, like when they come in, are you worried about like getting their hands washed and
Yeah.
making sure they're well?
Yep, hands washed, sometimes even clothes change. Like if it's depending on the day, I'm like thinking about it a lot. I'll be like, can you just change your clothes real quick after you wash your hands?
Because
Yeah.
that's a real concern. So what are the things like if you were talking to somebody who is like you 2 years ago, like they just barely are in the NICU, like
Yeah.
what are the advice that you would give them to? Because you look really happy and it looks like you've got it together with your kids
Yeah.
and you have a sweet little boy who keeps wandering in and talking. And, like what would you, and maybe even what would you tell yourself if you were to go back and be like, this one thing is what you should know?
Um, well, I feel like every NICU experience is so different. And so, like, I want to say my go-to is like, it's going to be okay. But I also know that there are some families that that's not true for. Um, so I know that's what I kept telling myself is that like it's hard now, but it will be okay. Like someday we'll be able to look back on this and talk about it without crying and talk about it, as like a testimony to like our strength as a family and, that we got through that so we can get through anything. And that everything turned out okay. He still has, his little struggles here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, it's minuscule.
He's doing really good. Okay, you said something about your family got stronger. So this is my new question I keep asking, and I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, "So tell me how your relationship
Mhm.
like went with this, because this is a lot of stress on you.
Mhm.
It's probably feeling a lot of stress to provide
Yes.
for
Yeah.
this."
It was, I know right after I had Kai and I was still hospitalized myself, I was very emotional, and I wanted my husband by my side the whole time. And he's like, we have other kids. Like, I need to go be with them. And which I understand now, but in the moment I was like, I just want you to sit here with me. And if you knew my husband, he cannot sit still whatsoever. So I think he was going a little crazy in the hospital. And then finally I was like, okay, just go be with our boys. Like, it's okay. So it was hard at first. I was really sad. But he kind of just did whatever I needed him to do. And, you know, made me feel like I was doing enough, even when I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And yeah, it just kind of talked me down a lot. Yeah. And he was that.
He's been really supportive.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Working his butt off to make sure that, we could afford the hotel stays and, all the things that needed to be done.
That's a lot that comes with that.
Yeah.
As far as like the G-tube care, how is he with it? Does he do it or does he not? Does he just kind of shy away?
No, not at all. He does feedings, like he can hook him up to his feeds and stuff like that, but he's never changed the G-tube. When he had the NG tube, because he was ripping it out so often, he had to learn how to get it back in when I wasn't home, which he did not enjoy, which nobody does, but he, did not like it. And now with the G-tube, I do it mostly all on my own.
My husband's the same way. He can do it. Now he can do it.
Yeah.
He was like, I think it was this last year. I was like, okay. You didn't have to be able to do it. Like, you don't have to do it all the time. So
Yeah.
if I'm home,
Yeah.
you take it because we have to. I mean, we obviously have to put it in a lot because she's
right. Yeah. It's definitely a good skill to know.
Yes, everybody in the house. In fact, my kids, my 14-year-old twins are the ones, they're like, no big deal. They're like,
yeah, easy enough.
Yeah. I think once you get used to it, it's not that big a deal, but it looks a little daunting. Like, I mean,
it does. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. Okay, there was one more. Oh, you're like, what do you do for yourself? And that doesn't necessarily mean like, I don't mean like trips and but not like that. But like,
Right.
what are the things that you do to kind of keep you like centered? Oh, we didn't. First of all, I'm going to ask you really quick. Do you do overnight feeds?
No. Nope. He stopped those pretty early on after coming home because he was NICU trained. So he slept, I mean, for a little bit, he was still getting up every 3 hours, but then his sleep has always been amazing in comparison to my other two.
Yeah. Millie sleeps really great, but her machines are always going off. But.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you do for yourself? Like, what are the things that you do to keep yourself focused on like the good things and not so worried about all of this stuff and kind of also like to manage kind of the PTSD that comes along with a lot of the things that you experienced?
That's a good question. I don't really have hobbies. I don't really do much. I'm trying to, like, I've been talking to my husband, like I need to find something that I enjoy, or even just like, a day out of the house, just, stuff like that, get some peace and quiet. But I think just talking about my feelings to like my few closest friends has always been a really good outlet for me. Like my sister and whatever, just this time of year is especially hard because it's, 2 years ago when it all happened. So I think about it a lot more frequently. But also just being with my kids and seeing how far they've come and everything like that, puts me at ease.
Well, and I think friends are a huge part of it. Like if you have people to talk to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean. I feel like sometimes we blow up self-care into like this thing where I have to go to the spa once a month or something crazy. That's not true.
No.
Maybe for some people, it's not true for,
right.
Probably every single person on this that's thinking about this. But I think it's important to, just find something like for me, it was looking back to what I did before,
Mhm.
like before the crazy, I was like on a good diet, or before the crazy, I like to do this kind of exercise and trying to like incorporate things that, because I don't know about like reinventing the wheel in the middle of trying to do like therapies and feeds and like, but I'm glad you have friends, and your mom lives close to you still.
Yeah. Yep. She lives like 5 minutes down the road.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's what an awesome thing. So that's
Yeah. And my in-laws live like 15 minutes. So we're
well,
all,
you guys have lots of good support.
yeah.
That's good. That's so necessary when you have little kids.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's nice to get like that way you don't get overburdened. Because you have grandparents who want to take the kids, right?
Yeah. Sometimes.
I
Yeah.
keep telling my kids to have kids because I want to take the kids.
Yeah. I look forward to that day someday.
It's fun. I'm in a good. Well, you're like me. That my son that you met is like your oldest son, and you. You got like you're
Yeah.
a little bit younger even.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy.
I know it's so fun. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to like share? This was so perfect, and we're like right at the right amount of time here.
I don't think so, but it was really therapeutic talking about it.
I think it's good, and I think it's good for people to hear the different stories. I'm really impressed with you. Well, I'm impressed every single time, but like your NICU, and then like all of these different things, like you've done it twice, and I just think it's amazing, and just have like really good light about you.
Yeah, I definitely have hard days. When I sit and think about it, I was seeing a therapist for a little bit and mostly just talking about the grief that comes with my last experience giving birth because my husband and I decided we're not going to have any more kids. And so coming to grips with that was really hard. And so when I think too deeply about that, I get down in the dumps. But then I just try and tell myself, like, my body clearly cannot hold babies to term and no matter what the issue is. So it's just better to not go through that again, no matter how bad I might want another baby. It's just like for the best is what I just keep telling myself.
Well, and it's hard at any phase in life to kind of shut that down.
Yeah.
That's a difficult,
I believe it.
me, that's difficult too, because we had our 6 and 7 years. And then I was like, I can't do anymore. And it took me about 10 years, and then I wanted a bunch more kids. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that was way over, right?
Yeah. When we have a hard day with all the kids, I'm like, okay, I get it. And then I look at my 2-year-old who starts walking and I'm like, oh man, I'm never going to have a little baby. And I started having kids young. So now all of my friends are starting to have kids. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. But I can just get baby cuddles from them. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So anyway, I'm just totally like, you are awesome, what you've been through and what you've come through. And I'm so excited for Kai that he's walking.
Yeah,
That's
thank you. Me too.
you. I just love all of these little things. I feel like the excitement is so much more with
Yes,
kids. Like,
it is.
I feel like the other kids, they did things and it was exciting for like 5 minutes because then they just moved on,
Right. They just keep on going.
It's like these well fought victories are something really important. So,
Really. Yeah.
well, it was so nice to meet you,
Me
Ashton.
too. I'm so glad I got to do this. Thank you guys
Yes,
for asking me to do it.
of course. And if you ever have like something that you really want to talk about, like let's do it again. If you're like, yeah, if you have something, I tell everyone that I'm like, if you have something that you remember and you're like, I want to tell everybody about this NICU experience, then I'm here for it. I think that this is so good for everyone. I think for me, it's just so great to hear. It's
Yeah.
and good to meet like strong moms who are
Yeah.
doing.
It's very comforting knowing that other people have gone through similar situations.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to be the exact same, but I feel like we're at least in the right language. I get it.
Far.
Let's see.
You
Peanut butter.
you got peanut butter on your fingers.
No, me. It.
Oh, okay. Do you want to go wash your hands? Life is hard when you're 4.
It is, especially if you get something on your hand.
Yes. Okay, I'll help you in a sec.
All right. Well, we could just wrap up and you can take care of that. But man, it was so nice to meet you.
It was so great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes. Bye-bye.